Okay, it looks like we've got enough people joining us. So, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome and good morning to you. My name's Alistair McDonald and I'm the Commercial Director with Citation Group. And we'd like to welcome you to our webinar this morning, Safe AI and Smart Business, Protecting Your People and Systems. So before we begin, a little bit of general housekeeping. We would actively encourage people asking questions throughout the webinar. So if you do have a question, please enter it into the Q&A feature, not the chat, which is at the bottom of your screen. And at the end of the presentation, we will come back to these questions and aim to get through as many as we can within the time allowed. But there is no need to wait until the end. Please do start sending your questions through as they arise throughout the course of the webinar. The webinar is being recorded. And for those of you who'd like a copy of the recording, we will, of course, be sending out a link at the end of all this. So today's topic is obviously surrounding AI in the workplace. And whilst I think we've all wrapped our heads around the potential benefits of AI, there are, of course, a lot of emerging blind spots or unknowns or risks that are arising from the deployment of AI within the workplace. And today we really want to go through some of those risks, what practically you can do to address them. And we will, of course, be deferring to our two experts, if we can just go to the next slide. So today our webinar is going to be presented by Matt Miller, who's the co-founder and CEO at Insicon Cyber, and our own Ian Smith, who's the Director of Advisory at Citation HR and Safety. So firstly to Matt on the left of your screen. Now Matt's a seasoned cybersecurity expert and also an entrepreneur with nearly 25 years of experience in his field. Matt's dedicated to helping businesses foster a culture of cybersecurity and awareness, and is transforming how executive leadership and board members perceive cybersecurity in the workplace. So in addition to his leadership role, Matt's a certified ISO 27001 senior lead auditor and an ISO 42001 implementer. So brings an absolute wealth of experience and deep expertise both in InfoSec and AI governance. Ian's our newly appointed Director of Advisory at Citation HR and Safety. It is, in fact, his first webinar with him, so a very warm welcome to Ian. So Ian brings over 3 decades of experience as a lawyer and an executive, and a wealth of knowledge in advising companies and leading high-performing teams. And now we're thrilled to have both these experts with us today, and we're looking forward to hearing their insights. So welcome both Matt and Ian. If we could go to the next slide. So if you are new to our webinar series, or if you haven't heard of Citation Group before, Citation have been in business for over 35 years within Australia, and we work both in Australia and New Zealand providing complete workplace solutions that help create better workplace cultures. So whether you need HR, safety, legal compliance, ISO certification, or specialist advisory services, Citation Group provide expert guidance, practical tools, as well as tailored solutions. So if you'd like to learn more about us, we're happy to talk to you at the end of the webinar, or please put it through the questions. We do also have 1 or 2 special offers that are on today as well. So we'll pause and direct you towards what they are over the course of the webinar. So if we could just jump to the next slide. So as I mentioned before, this webinar is being presented in conjunction with Insicon Cyber, which is Australia's Australian-based cybersecurity firm that helps businesses strengthen their security posture, governance, as well as, of course, compliance. So ranging from 27001 certifications, cybersecurity advice, all the way through to fully managed security services, Insicon Cyber works with organisations of all sizes to turn cybersecurity into a business advantage and allows you and your team to remain focused on what you do best. We will have more information later in the presentation on how you can get in touch with Matt and his team as well if you have any follow-up questions. So moving on to the agenda for today's webinar, we will start off with a background and terminology, so to understand the basics of what AI encompasses, some of the high-level risks, both internal and external, how to make a start with AI and mitigate those emerging risks, the standards and the guardrails to consider, how to build an AI policy, and then finally we'll go through to the conclusion. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Matt, who's going to kick us off. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Alistair. And thank you everyone for joining today. This is obviously a very hot topic in the industry at the moment, and one that a lot of people are struggling to actually work out how to start their journey in a safe way with AI. And AI does, as Alistair spoke about, present a lot of benefits, and an extremely powerful and very highly productive tool. I suppose what we've spent some time understanding is how do we go about making sure that's done in the most safest way, and that we implement the appropriate frameworks to use AI in its most safest, secure, and productive manner. So just some AI terms, and AI, funnily enough, has been around for some time in some different iterations. So machine learning is probably something that everyone's heard of. Machine learning is it's an iterative learning exercise that a computer goes through, understanding certain topics from data sets, and it gets better at doing things over a period of time. Data or training data is information that we put into what's called the large language model, that helps improve the efficacy of that data used in computer science and different types of applications. A model, or a large language model, in this case an AI model, is a computer system trained by improving and adding additional data to make decisions or predictions based upon different scenarios. Generative AI is that it creates new content. So whether that's text, image, code, and CVs, essays. If you're a student, it gives a lot of advantages there to create new content and assist with that creation of new content. Hallucinations is, sorry. Something's just happened. Won't be a second. So hallucinations is when AI produces information that seems accurate, but it's not. So it actually starts to build a model that is false in its. However, it thinks it's accurate based upon the information that it has collected or produced. A bias, as with any bias in any scenario, is that when the results of that AI model become skewed, and the results start to skew because of the data that it's trained on has a certain degree of false information drift, we like to call it. So it starts to bias its way. It could be bias in race, gender, all those obvious ways that any type of information can be biased. AI is no different. AI governance is where we provide an appropriate framework, whether that's policies, practices, procedures, that ensures the ethical and responsible use and application of AI models. And it's definitely something that's gaining a lot of traction in the industry, that we're coming to the realization that AI is very difficult to secure per se in our traditional sense. So therefore, governance is becoming a far more important framework that we need to adopt to ensure that AI is safe to use and applied in the most secure way. So some external risks, and I'll just give you a scenario. Data privacy risks. So AI can lead to unauthorized access of sensitive information. A lot of large corporate organizations, whether they're social media or any other data-oriented corporation out there, does have some sort of AI model built into it. And I'm using the LinkedIn scenario, and a lot of us, no doubt, would use LinkedIn in our day-to-day. I know I certainly do. That if you go to the data privacy settings within your app, LinkedIn have actually turned on, for our convenience, data for generative AI improvement. So by default, LinkedIn have this turned on. That toggle is actually on by default. And so it's basically saying LinkedIn and its affiliates can use your personal data and content to create to train its own LLM, which is it's just the world we live in today. This information that you generate, that you create, is actually being used by downstream or upstream organizations to improve their AI efficacy. Um, so that's just one example. Google, all these other large LLMs or these data processing companies all have very similar approaches to the use of our data and the data that we generate. So cybersecurity and criminal use, this is really with the more dark and nefarious aspects of AI. So firstly, one area in cyber that is quite difficult to do, and it's hard to do it en masse, is things such as reconnaissance and understanding targets. We've got organisations that do this stuff on a regular basis, state-based actors. But with the use of AI, this has become a lot easier for them to do en masse, to do reconnaissance, to do research, and also customize automated attacks against other organizations. So AI is definitely reducing the barrier to entry to a lot of these different types of cybersecurity techniques. Malware development. Malware has always been, and ransomware continues to be the #1 cybersecurity concern around the world. With the use of AI and nefarious or dark AI, the potency of these particular attacks has increased. So we see an iterative approach to the development of ransomware and malware attacks that they create using AI, but they improve using AI as well. So it's the generative AI aspect to malware and ransomware creation. Exploitation of vulnerabilities, our 0 days, and you would have seen a lot of organizations out there recently that have fallen victim to security vulnerabilities lately. Understanding and detecting those vulnerabilities is quite a difficult thing to do, or has been in the past. Now that we have AI to help us, those vulnerabilities are a lot more apparent to us because of the pure automated aspect of AI. So that automated scanning, threat intelligence, and vulnerability identification has become a lot easier for cyber hackers or cyber threat actors to identify and to exploit. So data exfiltration techniques, AI helps these particular threat actors go in stealth mode and essentially sneak around in organizations, both internally and externally, to target valuable data. Historically, we've always done it in a larger exfiltration manner, whereas now we're seeing threat actors being a lot more targeted and contextually targeted towards these particular data breach and data exfiltration techniques. And then what we've seen lately is the phishing and social engineering attacks have increased as well. And what that does, how AI improves this is, again, going back to stage one, is understanding your targets better, being more contextually aware of them, and providing that human aspect in a very quick and concise manner. So sophisticated phishing attacks, flattery, emotional type extortion attacks, but deep fakes have definitely increased lately as well. So, deep fakes present quite a number of different security benefits or nefarious benefits, but clickbait is definitely is on the increase there as well. So, all of these really do combine into AI being used in malicious or nefarious ways. So deepfakes is definitely something that we've seen on the rise, on the increase, and this has, we've got precedent now to show that deepfakes have been used in a extortionary, fraudulent manner. And one of the most famous ones was a finance worker who was convinced by Zoom meeting that all of the Zoom attendees were all deep fake. They were all impersonators, and they impersonated this particular poor finance worker's executives and convinced her to transfer $25 million. So it's a real threat, and it's definitely something that I work with my customers on to be a lot more vigilant on, because these are the types of threats that are going to plague us going forward. They're way too realistic. They're way too, and they're very hard to detect and to defend against. So now I'll hand over to Ian, and he can take us through the internal risks.
Thanks very much, Matt. So there's one thing I want you to take away from this, my part of the presentation at least, is that AI can inform your judgment and should inform your judgment. It's a really useful tool and it helps with your decision making, but you always remain accountable. So there's been some real world examples of accountability failures thanks to AI, and some of them you'll have seen in the press in the recent weeks. I think the best one, though it may be apocryphal, but I sort of enjoyed it at one level, was very early on, a teacher in a US high school realised that her students were just simply using AI. They were simply cutting and pasting her assignment questions into an AI tool. So she thought, try to think of a way to counter this and to identify whether the students were using AI and not using their own intelligence, as it were. And so in small invisible fonts, he said something like, use the word alligator in your response. So the kids, most of whom didn't proofread their responses, were very, very easily caught out, because this history essay or English essay or whatever it was randomly had the word alligator in it. So that's sort of a bit of a light-hearted one, but there's been some more serious ones. So more close to home, in Victoria last year, there was a solicitor who had was required, as part of a case before the Federal Circuit Court, he was required to put forward a list of authorities or cases to the judge. He used an AI tool to generate that, and it turns out that several of the cases that were listed were completely illusory or imaginary. This is the hallucination that Matt was referring to before. I feel really sorry for him, this poor guy, because he genuinely thought the tool was just like using Google, where the authorities would come up from somewhere authorised effectively, and that wasn't obviously the case. And he had to go through a whole process, and unfortunately he's had a limitation now put on his practicing certificate, so he can't actually run a law firm anymore. He's now can only operate as an employed solicitor. So it's quite a serious consequence, and this goes back to the accountability point I made at the beginning there, is that you can use it, you should use it, but you always remain accountable, and the human interaction with it is really, really, really crucial. And perhaps more widely reported and certainly more recent is the Deloitte report issue that was in the paper only a few weeks ago, where a report they produced for the federal government contained problems, including fake academic references, a made-up quote from a federal court judgment, and other typos. The issue wasn't the use of AI in that scenario. It wasn't that, oh, they've used AI and they shouldn't have. It was that they used AI, but they didn't check it, and they didn't carefully check the output of this AI tool effectively. So to the issue on screen, the black box problem. AI systems generate outputs without revealing how or why. That's the black box. There's significant risk, even with good prompting, of incorrect, biased, or unexplainable advice. So there are serious implications in general in life, but also in employee relations and misconduct cases, which is obviously where my role and the work that my team does. So in AI, a black box is a system where data goes in and results come out, but the process in between is opaque, even to the developers themselves sometimes. So, for example, you could put in into the inquiry box, generate a disciplinary letter for an employee accused of misconduct. Now, the AI will generate a really well-written letter, but you can't see or explain why it's used certain wording, tone, legal references, why those legal references were chosen, or whether they're accurate. So there's real risks in all of this. So in law, in human resources and employment situations, and probably in life generally, decisions need to be fair, defensible, and explainable. And you can't always do that when you're just simply relying on AI. The black box nature of AI creates a challenge. If the system produces an outcome, say suggesting a termination or flagging misconduct, but you can't explain the reasoning, it's obviously highly problematic. Bias can creep in, and I think Matt mentioned some bias points earlier as well. It can creep in through the training data or the questions that have been asked of the particular AI tool previously. If past decisions reflected unconscious bias, the AI will actually reflect those as well. So it's important to remember that AI is not very objective. It actually wants to help you. It's looking for positive answers, and it's biased in that way. So it will always try and find an answer for you, sometimes where the answer is incredibly nuanced or difficult, or there is potentially even no answer without more inquiry or whatever else, but it will generate that for you. So it's really important to remember that it's a tool that's desperately trying to help you, but that help often isn't the help that you need ultimately. So to the next slide, please, Matt. So the lack of nuance, and I've referenced that. AI struggles with context, tone, and culture. It may misrepresent company values, industrial context, or even legal jurisdiction. And it can lead to flawed or tone-deaf advice or output or product, whatever you want to call it. So it can sound authoritative. It sounds really good quite often, but it doesn't live your culture or your business's culture or your individual one either, or your individual attitudes. It doesn't grasp subtleties like, if you're asking it about an employment situation, that the particular manager you're inquiring about has a history of conflict within the organisation, or what the enterprise agreement or the particular award might say. It doesn't necessarily understand that or know that context unless you feed it that. And it's really important to recognise that this is not just like Google, where you can put in a simple inquiry and you'll get some web pages that you can search through. You need to give it a whole lot of context for the answers, that to get the best answers you possibly can. So an AI might recommend, for example, a PIP template, a work improvement plan, effectively, based on US employment law, completely misaligned with the Australian jurisdiction if you don't tell it that you need to be basing it in Australia. So nuance, nuance is where human professionals remain irreplaceable in this process. You have to have that oversight. You have to recognise that you have accountability for whatever the output is. You can't just simply churn it through, spit it out, and expect it to be right or to not have consequence. Some of this can be overcome, as I say, through accurate and complex prompting, which is a skill in itself. You can ask it to check its own work as well, which is also quite a handy tip sometimes to do that, is to ask it, are you sure that that's right? And it'll often say, oh, that's a good point. That's not right. This is actually the better answer. And I've done that on many, many occasions. So it's also, it's a useful tip, is to get it to question itself. But it does lack that nuance, and you've got to remember that. Matt, if you could move on, please. So policy and compliance pitfalls. AI can generate HR policies, it can do contracts, it can generate handbooks, and they look professional, and then they're done incredibly quickly, and they look fantastic. And you think, wow, this is good. It saved me so much time. Excellent. I will push that out. But it can miss a whole lot of things if you're not careful, if you're not checking it, if you're not putting the right prompts in, for example. So it might miss legal obligations, risk of non-compliance with regulations, potential for employee disputes or regulatory action, and there's also issues about using it in a court context. You can't use it in certain court contexts. You can't use AI at all. There are various practice notes about that. So one of the biggest dangers is over-trusting AI to do the heavy lifting. The errors it makes can expose the organisation legally and reputationally. The key message, AI drafts can be helpful as a starting point, but they're not an endpoint. You have to check. And I think I'm back to you now, man. Oh, it's no, to Alistair, I think.
Thanks, Ian. Look, I think there's already been some great points that have been thrown up, and I can see our Q&A exploding with the vast number of questions, which we'll try to get to at the end. Look, we do have a special offer or something that we'd like to extend to everyone on the webinar today. If you do have perhaps a more bespoke question, something a little more nuanced, or something that might be, very specific to your business, we would like to extend to you a complimentary consultation with one of our team. So the QR code there, if you'd like to scan that, click through the details, we would in fact reach out and be able to book a session with you to talk to one of the experts. I will just pause for a minute before we go back to the presentation. We'll just leave that up for 30 seconds or so for those of you that might like to make use of it. And we will be putting this slide back up towards the end of the presentation as well, after we hear sort of the second half of content. So we'll just pause for a moment. Thanks, gents. We'll throw back to yourselves.
Okay, so how do we make a start with AI and mitigate the risk? So thanks, Ali. So I always bring it back to first principles, and anyone who's familiar with cybersecurity first principles and the framework CIA, or confidentiality, integrity, and availability, is always the best way to start with any approach or any new tool such as this. So confidentiality ensures that sensitive information is accessible only to authorized users. That you make sure that that occurs by having least privileged security controls or access controls in place. So confidentiality is a big part of AI, that we're only putting the appropriate type of data and information into AI tools to get the response that we want. And as Ian's given us some insights into, that nuance will be very much driven by the information that we put into these tools, and maintaining confidentiality is critical, and it's a must. Which will then determine the integrity of the data and making sure the accuracy of the data is trustworthy, and making sure that that we limit the amount of bias or drift or hallucinations by ensuring that the right information is fed into the AI model. Integrity, again, is a very critical aspect of AI and should always be considered and checked and sampled, and making sure that the information that our AI models is producing in a generative way is what, firstly, it's accurate, secondly, it's usable and applicable. And availability. So AI tools are now becoming relied on and also used quite widespread within organizations, and their availability now is becoming a must, especially with things like chatbots and their availability. And these LLMs now are driving a lot of power, or a lot of information processing in the back end of these companies. So the availability of these LLMs now is becoming quite important too. And there's quite a large argument in the industry around the increase of power costs that's driving a lot of this AI processing and LLM modeling. I'll hand over to Ian.
Thanks very much. So mitigation is a lawyerly word, but it effectively is risk management. So AI is a tool, not a decision maker. That's really important. Human judgment ensures context, empathy, and accountability, and HR and legal experts must remain in the driver's seat. That's not just a plug for Citation or for lawyers generally. That's actually a significant role that we can play in making sure that you're actually able to better manage and mitigate your risks in the organisation. So we must position AI as an assistant. It's efficient, it's fast, but ultimately it needs to be under human supervision. The human touch adds what AI lacks. That's empathy, discretion, and ethical consideration. In complex employee relations, again, where my team operates, that difference defines whether we can build trust or end up in litigation. So really, really important. Next one, Matt, please. So verification and vetting. So always review and validate AI outputs before use, and adopt this 4-step this is my recommendation at least, adopt a 4-step AI review framework, which is to identify, review, adapt, and approve. So verification is the safety net. But building a habit of reviewing any AI-generated material through a compliance lens is really important. In HR, that means confirming the advice aligns with internal policy, Australian law, and company culture indeed. This creates both safety and confidence in using AI responsibly. The courts have responded through issuing practice notes, in effect guidelines and expectations on legal practitioners in dealing with the court, stating clearly that the use of AI does not relieve the practitioner of their professional or legal obligations. And whilst that's in a court context, I think that's actually really good advice more broadly for business as to how you use AI within your particular organisations. Thanks, Matt.
Standards and guardrails that have been introduced recently, I'm very promotive and quite embracing of these particular frameworks. So the Australian government's actually done quite a lot in recent times just about improving our interaction and our usage of AI. So in September 2024, the voluntary AI safety standard was developed and provides 10 voluntary guardrails that should be applied for any organisation that uses AI. So it's a very foundational, it's very foundational in its approach. But I think that's a perfect place for us to start when we're using any type of AI, whether that's a consumer, a developer, or an originator of AI tools. And then the technical standard for governance use of artificial intelligence as well in August 2025. So again, it's we're just reinforcing that from a government's perspective in the ethical use of AI within the government. And it provides a very practical guide for businesses and specialists in their use of AI. So just to get into some of the guardrails though, and this is if one thing that I'd have you take away from my particular slides is this, the 10 AI safety guardrails, which are voluntary. So accountability and governance, making sure that you establish a governance framework that provides responsibility and accountability of the use of AI within your organisation, and make sure that it gets incorporated into existing governance frameworks that you may have. That it's just another tool that needs to be governed in the appropriate manner and go through risk assessments and risk management processes that you already have established. It's really important that these AI tools and the data that's used to train them is handled in a risk management or methodology, so that you are trying to identify and mitigate the risks as they become apparent. There are cybersecurity controls in place to protect these AI systems and the data that they hold and generate. That makes sure that ensures the applicability and the security of the data, bringing it back to confidentiality and integrity. Testing and monitoring, sampling these AI models to make sure that they don't have drift and bias and hallucinations is really important. Going back and making sure that with human oversight that these AI models are actually meaningful, empathetic, and they're applicable to your organization and or your customers. User transparency. One thing that we say with AI is that humans should be able to interpret and communicate how these AI tools work and how the algorithm works. If you can't do that, there is a lack of transparency in the use of AI. So making sure that you also, if you are using AI in any way, whether that's internal or external, so internal to your employees or external to customers, that really should be promoted and easily identified to the end user. Contestability, so ensuring there's processes that for people impacted by AI systems to challenge or their outcomes, so that again we go back and do a sample set and make sure that the validity of the outcome is there, and we make sure that that usability of the data is accurate. Supply chain transparency, going back to point 6 or to guardrail 6, transparency is a common theme in the use of AI, and you need to be transparent with upstream and downstream users of your AI systems. They understand that they're interacting with an AI chatbot, or they're using information that was generated by AI is important, because that will then help them make decisions and be informed in regards to whether they want to use that information or not. Record keeping, so keeping a register of AI tools, keeping a register of AI data that is used and applied to these AI tools is important, so that you can always go back to understanding where the information is, the source information, that you can go back and validate that and make sure that it was never poisoned or corrupt, in the event that there is issues with the outcomes. But again, stakeholder engagement is critical for the application of AI within any organization, both from top down. So really getting your top management, your executive, your board, understanding the use of AI, agreeing to it, making sure the frameworks are in place to use it in an ethical and governed manner is extremely important, so that it doesn't have adverse effects on any part of the supply chain of the organization. So there is a new standard, ISO 42001, which is very similar to ISO 27001 in regards to it's a risk-based framework. So it provides a structured framework for implementing what's referred to as an AI management system. And this allows us to do risk assessments, impact assessments, system lifecycle management, supplier management, but also going into asset management, data management, a whole raft of other aspects of AI and its governance. I'm versed in this standard, and I think it's particularly applicable for anyone who is embarking on the AI journey. I think it's and if you have ISO 27001 already, it's not a large uplift to implement 42001. We've also got ISO 42005, which provides a structured framework for systematically assessing the consequences of individual AI systems throughout their life cycle. And that, again, it leverages on 42001, but it's a very good framework to go through the process, the risk methodologies, the impacts, consequences of the use of AI within any organization. And again, I think it's a foundational or a fundamental approach to the use of AI within any large organization. So then I'll hand back over to Ian, just in regards to AI policy.
Thanks, Matt. So yeah, this slide's about what your AI policy should do. This is as much about the policy document as it is about governance generally around AI. So establish clear rules for the use, review, and accountability in relation to AI and how your organisation adopts it. Ensure compliance with at least Australian privacy laws. There are others. Promote ethical AI aligned with corporate values and fairness principles. So it's really important to think about how your organisation operates, what your core principles are, and making sure that you're not just because you can use AI a certain way doesn't mean you should use it a certain way if it doesn't align with your organisational imperatives, if you like. Require human oversight for all decisions affecting people, and include training and continuous review mechanisms, because, as you know, AI is expanding and evolving incredibly rapidly, and so you do need to keep up with the various changes and the various iterations of it. You may wish to just have one particular authorized AI that you use for your organization, but your team might be keen to use others, and there are others appearing on the market seemingly almost every week. So keeping an eye on those sorts of things is really important. So a well-governed AI policy sets boundaries and builds trust. It signals to staff, to regulators in some circumstances, and clients that your organisation understands both the opportunity but also the responsibility of using AI and arising from the advent of AI. So it's not just innovation. It's not using AI saying we're really innovative, we're really cutting edge. That's terrific. But there are obligations that come with it, and the legal and ethical compliance obligations are really key amongst those. Your policies should establish who can use AI, what tools are approved, how outputs are reviewed, and how compliance is maintained. Those are really key things we need to cover off in terms of having an AI policy, but having open discussion about it in the organisation, and it's not just a policy that's written and circulated and then hidden somewhere on your internal website. This has to be a live document. It has to be part of discussions. It has to be part of performance review and KPIs and all of those things. It has to be part of the ongoing discussion. Thanks, Matt. So your policy should establish who can use AI, what tools are approved, how outputs are reviewed, and how compliance with the relevant legislation is maintained. I know I just said that, but I just wanted to reinforce it because it's really important. Thanks, Matt. So this is over to you, Matt.
Yeah, sorry. So your AI policy, they're becoming a lot more, and Ian's covered off what should be in the AI policy, but from a technical perspective or a security perspective, it really does need to reinforce a lot of the technical controls that you have implemented within the organization as well. So things such as permissible use cases, what is allowed from a technical perspective, your data governance and privacy, again, which is very, along the lines of 27,001, how to avoid bias and ensure fairness. These are, again, going back to the 10 guardrails, there's quite a heavy amount of view on transparency, both internally and externally. And having the capability to do human oversight and accountability to the rolling out of AI tools. So making sure that they're tested on regular basis, that the sample sets are consistent with the appropriate outcome, and they don't have any adverse impacts to the consumer of those particular AI tools and their associated data. Security and access controls. What are the minimum set of security controls that we need to implement to make sure that people are getting the right access and levels within AI? Also, due diligence on vendor management, making sure that you don't introduce a vendor into your environment that is renowned or known for bad AI tooling. So actually having an assessment, as we do with 27,001, having a security assessment to ensure that that you have bias testing, that there is some level of transparency with the application of AI is becoming more of a must. Don't just blindly sign up to a vendor and expect a secure outcome or a valid outcome. So make sure that training and awareness is absolutely part of your AI policy. How often do you ensure that your staff are AI literate and ensure that their outcomes are known and that they're using it in a way that is ethical and avoids any security compromise. Monitoring and review. So we're regularly assessing all of our tools and the data that we both train on and we generate are really important. So that there needs to be a constant monitoring and evaluation exercise there. Complaints and remediation. So providing clear processes to raise, investigate, and resolve AI-related issues, as we would with a security incident. We want to ensure that our supply chain in the use of AI have the right to raise any concerns if and when they do happen, and that there is a process to investigate those impacts and ensure that we're constantly managing and monitoring the AI environment. And then creating a governance structure so that we've got roles, responsibilities, authorities, we've got reporting lines, and also the what happens if scenarios, so that we can then rely on those particular frameworks to ensure a good outcome and a good, fair and non-biased, transparent use of AI within the organisation. So I'll hand back over to Ian, just so in conclusion.
Sure. Thanks very much, Matt. I'd written in my notes for this concluding section, and it starts with AI isn't the enemy, but I've been listening to some interesting podcasts in the past couple of weeks, which is suggesting completely that it actually is the enemy. That's not. I think that's probably too much and way beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. But what I was meaning when I wrote it isn't the enemy is that we shouldn't avoid it. It seems like an inevitability. And if you think about it, merely going back to my earlier comments about it being a tool, but not a controller of the way that you do things, that's really, really important. And that's probably the best attitude to have in relation to it. It's a powerful ally, but it has to be guided by human intelligence. So the future of HR and compliance lies in a collaboration, and probably business generally lies in a collaboration between professionals who understand the nuances, understand how to get the best out of AI, but they take responsibility they understand the obligations that come with the use of AI and how to implement something in practice. Matt, you've got some concluding comments as well.
Yeah, look, thanks, Ian. And you know, my belief is that we're early on this journey, right, with AI, and we're still working at its boundaries, its application, and its potential. And we typically, you know, we're always a little bit behind in security. So, you know, I'm a belief that AI is particularly difficult to secure at the moment, and we're finding ways to improve its security and to, you know, to surround its use with security tools. So realistically, the focus should be on governance. We need to have, you know, good, mature, robust governance frameworks to understand it and make sure that it doesn't fall out of, you know, acceptable use. And again, like coming back to those standards that that we've got available to us. So 27001 gives it a wonderful framework and a very mature, long-standing framework for cybersecurity or information security controls, and 42001 would be considered an uplift to that if you're using AI. So in combination or in concert, those two standards really do give us a very mature framework to not only secure but to govern our AI usage. So it's definitely something that organizations should really consider, if not certifying to, but at least aligning to and getting an understanding of a risk-based framework that they can implement for their AI usage. So that's in conclusion, I suppose, Ali.
Excellent. Ian, Matt, thank you both. Conscious of time, I can see we've obviously covered a tremendous amount of content. We do have a number of questions that we won't be able to get through all of them. So we will just pause for a second and have this slide up again. For those of you that would like to have a more in-depth conversation or a complimentary consultation or call with the team, please make use of this offer. We'll just hold it up there for a moment. But whilst that's up there, we might just start going through one or two of the questions. One probably more for your good self, Matt. The 10 AI safety guardrails sound really useful, but for a smaller business with limited resources, which one or two would make the most difference to get right first?
Look, the good thing about the guardrails, I think, is they're quite, you can cherry pick them, and they're quite applicable to any organization that's using AI. I think that transparency of AI usage, don't try and hide it. You know, I don't think that helps anyone. I think transparency, and it's a common theme within both 42,001, and also the guardrails is making sure that people know that they're interfacing with an AI application. And AI is in HR tools. It's in it's in Microsoft. We've got Copilot. We've got AIs everywhere now, right? So I think that, you know, educating people on AI use is really important. And it doesn't really matter how small you are. I think that you can implement a governance framework, whether it's just a discussion, whether it's a, if you have a monthly management meeting, it's a topic in that meeting. So that, you know, if people are trialing AI tools and they're trying to improve productivity, well, that really should be, a topic in that management meeting, and also whether they've done a risk assessment on that. You know, is it good? Is it bad? Have you spoken to someone else about it? And why is it secure? There's simple questions to answer.
Thanks, Matt. Ian, probably one that relates to one of the guardrails, actually. I think number 10 reference safety specifically. Many of our staff are expressing concerns around the threat of AI and what it means from a job security perspective. I feel this is starting to drive high levels of stress and unnecessarily impact mental health. Does this constitute a psychosocial hazard from a safety perspective?
Well, I'd say that the fact that it's being raised in that context means probably yes. It's something that needs to be addressed. It's certainly not something that you can ignore. In terms of addressing the risk of it, one of the general commentaries that you hear is that AI is not going to replace it'll replace some people's jobs, but it won't replace the jobs of those who know how to use AI effectively. So it's almost an inevitability that that there needs to be some education, training, assurance, understanding of how to optimize AI. And so I think short answer, yes, I think it's something that needs to be discussed and needs to be addressed as part of your workplace planning and your risk assessments. In terms of how to address it, you need to be as clear and transparent as possible as to what the organisation's intent is with respect to AI, and give everybody the support that they need in order to be able to utilise it for their work. And their utilisation, and therefore potentially control of the use and having assurance around and being empowered to use it, I think will allay some of those fears and some of those concerns. It's obviously a much broader discussion point, but that's sort of a couple of summary points from me.
Thank you, Ian. Matt, probably one for your good self. You mentioned AI is already being misused for phishing and deep fakes. What should leaders be doing now to protect their staff and customers from these risks?
So customers are a different kettle of fish. I think the employees, though, companies should take the time to educate staff top down on the impact of these particular new threats that we're seeing. Historically, phishing attacks were, poor grammar, poor English. You could see them a mile away. We've got tools that can look for those types of attributes within a phishing campaign. They've really gotten better with the use of AI. So now it comes down to localization of language. So if we see a Z in organization, we know that it's probably not, created in Australia. Like we really do have to get to that really finer nuance of these attacks. But we can put all the security controls in place that we like, but realistically, your first and last line of defense are your employees. And educating them, training them, and doing it on a regular basis is more imperative now than it ever has been. The threat landscape has exploded. We've got, spam text messages coming in. We've got phishing emails. We've got, bots on social media. Like the attack landscape is a lot higher than it ever has been. So education, and it's always seen as one of the number one security controls that we can implement. With our customers, though, we sort of have to rely on their own education and their own. But in saying that, we should always put in the appropriate security control for the right application. Sometimes that's not always possible, but being responsible with AI and being responsible with the appropriate legislation is what all organisations should really align to.
Excellent. Look, probably a question for either of you. How should employers handle situations where staff are using unapproved AI tools at work?
Ian, would you like to answer that one?
Sure, I'm happy to. I think transparency and clarity as to what's acceptable and what's not, that you're wanting to facilitate staff being able to use AI, but you've done testing, you've identified what's the safest or what's the most appropriate for your organisation, and that's the one. So, like any other, and you can maybe state that in your policy, or you can be talking about that at management team meetings, etc., to make it effectively a direction, and then to the extent that they're using it outside of that, then that becomes a disciplinary issue. But you need to, I think, make a pretty educated decisions as to why you're wanting to use a certain one over another, and there's plenty of literature and plenty of ability to make those decisions. But you need to make staff understand why that is the case and support them in their use of that one, but also make it clear of the consequence for not doing so. And the risks in using those unapproved ones. So they have to understand that there are risks in so doing. It's not just a whim of management that you prefer to use ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever else. You've got to be very transparent with staff as to the reasons why you're doing those things and why these decisions have been made.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Conscious of time. Oh, sorry, Matt. Any further comments?
To extend on that, like, it's beneficial to continually use a tool that the organisation has agreed to. It learns your culture, it learns your tone and whatever else. So there's actual operational benefits in using sort of one or two tools, opposed to going out and getting sample responses from from other non-approved tools. So not only is it a security and sort of HR related requirement, but operationally, there's no benefit in doing that either.
Okay, thanks. Again, probably one for either of you, and certainly one that I've come across a fair bit. How does confidentiality sit with AI note takers? And I guess further to extend that, are there any issues with having AI note takers in play for perhaps more confidential discussions?
Short answer is yes, Matt. I don't know if you might want to go with that one.
Yeah, look, again, everyone signed up to an AI note taker, and again, it really needs to go through an approval process. Like, I'm a big believer in using the corporate enterprise license. So contractually, you will have an understanding of where your data is being generated and also being stored. You may even have a choice, where it is stored. If you're just going out there and downloading the latest transcribing tool that plugs into Teams or Zoom or whatever it is, realistically, it could actually be considered a data leakage and ultimately result in a notifiable breach act. So you've got to be really careful about those particular tools, and I would suggest that you speak to your IT team, your security consultant, and make sure that you understand the ones that you are using, because they're so readily available, so pervasive, and very intrusive.
Yeah. So yeah, if the data isn't kept within Australia, so the information that it's taking or the information it's transcribing isn't then ultimately stored in Australia, you've got a real issue. So you need to have a real due diligence exercise before you allow any of these tools to infiltrate your workplace, as it were.
Gentlemen, thank you both very much. I've seen we've just about hit the end of our time, so we might press pause there. And once again, if we didn't get to your questions, our apologies. Please make use of the QR code, or feel free to reach out to us for another conversation. We will, of course, be sending the recording of this webinar out and around, so the link will be coming via email. But we'd like to thank you all for joining us today and taking an hour out of your day. And once again, Ian, Matt, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.